So to get started, here I am on my desktop. Should look more or less like yours. However, on my desktop, you can see Unity is conveniently waiting right here for me to click on. You almost certainly don't have Unity on your desktop, so let me show you where you can find it and how you can put it on your desktop to make it easier to find in the future. Now, if you're pretty Mac savvy, you should have already guessed that we're going to be going to the Finder in the very bottom left corner. Clicking on Finder. Next, I want to go to Applications, because Unity is an application that we're going to be running. Now over here I have my list of folders and applications, and I'm going to scroll down almost to the very bottom, and second or third from the bottom you should see Unity, but this is just a folder. So let's click on the Unity folder, and going inside of here we should see our two bottom options are Unity and the Unity Bug Reporter. They both have a very similar looking logo. But if you want to get started, you can just double click on Unity. But if you want to make it easier to access in the future, you can simply click and hold on the icon and drag it over to your desktop. And when you let it go here, it will pop up as a shortcut that you can use in the future. Whichever way you decide to do it, eventually double click on Unity so we can actually get started. When you do that, you should see something like this. Now, I have a list of games that I've been working on here. You will probably have an empty list with almost nothing to see here. So what you'll need to do is come up to the top right and click on New. After clicking on New, don't hit Create Project right away. There's a few things that we want to make sure we understand. The first is the location. Let's make sure that you know where you're saving the game. To change that, just click on these three dots and then pick a location. Just click on these three dots and then you can pick a location. For example, I've put mine on the desktop. Once I've chosen that location, now there's one more thing I want you to do. Come up to Project Name, and let's delete this, and let's name it Survival Island, and then your name. Now, please, don't type the words your name, type your first name and your last name. I shouldn't have to explain that, but, well, just in case. With that done, your project should already be set to 3D, but you can check that if you want to, and then click on Create Project. You'll see a loading bar or two, but pretty soon, your project should be ready to get started. Now, a couple things just to make my life easier. My new project opens with the Services tab open up here. We don't really use the Services tab for much of anything, so just go from Services to Inspector. This is what we normally use on our right-hand side, so let's keep it on the Inspector for now. If I want a little more room to work in my scene view here, where I'm actually going to be building the bulk of my game, I can click on this edge between the inspector and the scene view, and I can just click and hold and slide that over. I can do the same thing on the left and at the bottom a little bit to make sure that I've got a nice big window to work in. But you can resize these at any time for your convenience depending on what you're working on. Now, our controls are going to be a little bit different since most of us will be working without a mouse. If you have a mouse at home, by all means, plug it in and it'll feel more familiar. But we can do everything we need to with the trackpad. But before we go over those controls, let's get something in here so we can actually see a little bit more of what's going on in our scene. We're going to need a terrain, so let's go up to Game Object, and then hover on 3D Object, scroll down to Terrain, and give that a click. So now we have our terrain, but we can only see one corner of it. So let's practice our camera controls a little bit. One of the easiest ones to learn is using two fingers on your trackpad to swipe towards you, zooms in, and if you swipe away from yourself with two fingers, then you zoom out. So zooming in and out is pretty simple. Now, if you want to pan your camera around your scene, you're going to need to click on this little hand icon up here in the top left. When I click on the hand, I can pan my camera around the scene. And this is incredibly helpful to see what's going on in different locations. The last thing I need to be able to do is to rotate my camera. This one's really important too. If you hold down the Option key on your keyboard, and then hold down the click on your trackpad, you can use another finger to rotate your view around. So, by using the hand up here to pan, Control-click to rotate, and two fingers swiping on your pad to zoom in and out, you can move all around your scene see things from whatever angle you need, and this is critically important to being able to design your scene. Another quick way to get around your scene is up here in the top right of your scene view. You can click on any of these different axes, and it will snap you to the X, Y, or Z axis. You can also click on the different faces of these cubes to see it from a specific side. So now that we know how to navigate our scene, let's review our terrain tools really quick, and then we'll call it quits for today. Now hopefully you'll remember that the terrain game object is a pretty unique game object. Let's go ahead and select it so we can do a quick review. I can either select it by clicking on the terrain in the hierarchy on the left, or I could click on something like my move tool and then click on it out here in the scene view. Either of these is fine, as long as we have your terrain selected so that when we go over to the inspector, we can see your terrain specific tools. Now for today, let's just get a little bit of practice with our terrain tools in. For example, if I click on my leftmost tool, which when I hover on it says raise and lower terrain height, well, it's pretty easy to understand. When I have this tool selected and I click, I can start raising up my terrain. If I shift click, I can lower down my terrain. I can't go any lower than the starting height though, so its lowest point is always going to be completely flat. If I wanted to create an area that looks like a valley, I would first have to raise up everything around it, and then shift click to lower down that area in between. Remember, you have a lot of different settings, so if you're trying to make some rough terrain, you don't have to go and paint it one little piece at a time. You can click on some of these more interesting brushes down here, and pretty quickly get rough patches of terrain that look really interesting without having to do everything by hand. Of course, you can also change your brush size, so that you can paint larger or smaller areas all at once. And you can also change the opacity, which if you turn it way up, is going to make things really jump up quickly, or if you turn it way down, will make your changes either non-existent or very, very subtle. Oftentimes, subtle changes are good, because you can get more control and make the changes more realistic than these incredibly steep jumps right here. But it's up to you. You're in control. Paint with the settings that are most convenient and helpful to you at the time. Oh, and always remember that Command-Z is your friend. If you make a mistake, Command-Z can help you undo almost anything. Some other terrain tools to practice with. Just to the right of the raise and lower terrain height tool is the set terrain tool. This one isn't quite as self-explanatory, so let's take a look at it. It says paint height. Hold shift to sample target height. What they mean by that is, let's say I wanted to make a plateau. I wanted a raised up area that gets flat. This could be really helpful because if I want to create an area that the player can explore, I might want them to go up a hill, but then have another landing, another flat area where they can walk around without having to fall into little cracks and crevices. So at the top of this hill here, I can hold down shift and then click. And now it has memorized that height. In fact, if you look over here in the settings, where we have height, it says 34 point, and it goes on and on there. But the point is, it has memorized that height, and now anything that is lower than that height will be raised up to that height. And if there were anything higher than that height, it would be lowered down. If I go back to my raise lower terrain tool, and I paint some areas that are higher, you'll see when I use paint height, and it still knows to do 34 point something, it will lower those areas back down. And you can do this with any height that you shift click, it can memorize that height and raise or lower areas to meet it. This is a really powerful tool, so be sure that you know how to use it. Now, I want to make sure that we get off to an easy start and I don't overwhelm you right at the beginning. So, all I want you to do today is follow these instructions to create a project, create a terrain, practice with the paint tools. You don't need to make anything beautiful or specific, but make sure that you've done a few things that show me you've been using these tools and getting used to them again. Take a screenshot of your work and share it with me in the comments to get credit for participating today. Now, we haven't done anything too amazing or anything that would take long to fix, but it's probably a good idea to get in the habit of saving your scenes. So don't forget to go up to File and Save Scenes. If this is your first time saving, like it is for me right now, you'll need to do this as a save as, which means you need to give it a name. So your name is already on the project. I really don't care what you name your scene. I mean, keep it school appropriate, but I'm just going to call this Level 1 or Test Level, whatever you want. And when you see it pop up down here, that means that your scene is saved and you're done for the day. Just remember to take a screenshot and share with me in the comments. So for now, good luck and have fun.